The gavel came down one last time on a Tuesday in November, and Walter Bishop, 80 years old, understood that his life had been sold for nothing. He stood in the doorway of his own home, a home he had built with his hands in 1972, watched his nephew Michael walk through the living room with a tape measure and a clipboard. Michael wore a Patagonia vest over a crisp white shirt. His shoes cost $400. He did not look at Walter. He looked at the crown molding, at the hardwood floors, at the fireplace Walter had laid brick by brick in the winter of '73, and he made notes on his clipboard like a man cataloging inventory. 1,600 square feet, Michael said to no one. Maybe 17 with the addition. Walter's hand found the door frame. His fingers gnarled, spotted, 80 years of living pressed into the knuckles rested against the wood he had milled himself from a black walnut that had stood on this property since before the Civil War. The tree had come down in a storm in 1971. Walter had saved every board. Michael, Walter said. His voice came out thin. Michael, son, this is my home. Michael looked up from his clipboard. His eyes were the same blue as Walter's brother's eyes, but where Thomas had looked at you with warmth, Michael looked at you like you were a piece of furniture he was deciding whether to keep. It's my home now, Uncle Walter. You signed the papers. Papers. Walter had signed them. 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday in November, in this very living room, with Frances sitting beside him on the sofa she had recovered in mustard yellow in 1985, the same sofa where she had nursed him through pneumonia in '92, the same sofa where she had fallen asleep on his shoulder on the night they learned they would never have children. He had signed because Michael had said it was temporary, a formality, a way to protect the property from estate taxes while Walter and Frances were still alive. You'll live here until you die, Michael had said, and his voice had been warm then, almost tender. I just need the deed in my name so the government can't touch it. You trust me, don't you, Uncle Walter? Walter had trusted him. The gavel in Walter's hand is auctioneer's gavel, the one he had used at his first auction in 1968. The one with the crack he had repaired himself with epoxy, and fine copper wire was the only thing he had carried out of the house that day. The rest of their belongings, Frances' hats, her sewing machine, the photographs, the good china from her mother, all of it remained inside, waiting for Michael's judgment. Where is Frances? Walter asked. Upstairs, Michael said. Packing. Packing for what? The assisted living facility in Rutland. It's a good place. I visited it myself. Walter felt something break inside him that had never broken before, not when the bank had foreclosed on his auction house in 2001. Not when the doctor had told them Frances couldn't have children. Not when his brother Thomas had died of a heart attack at 59, leaving Michael an orphan at 22. Walter had raised that boy. He had paid for his college. He had given him a job at the auction house. He had loved him like a son, and now Michael stood in his living room, wearing a Patagonia vest, and told him he was being sent to die in a place called Rutland. Why? Walter asked. The word cost him something. Michael shrugged. Because I need the liquidity. The house is worth $400,000. I have debts. It's not personal. But it was personal. It had always been personal. Walter understood that now, standing in his own doorway, holding a cracked gavel, watching his nephew measure his life in square feet. He turned and walked up the stairs. The steps creaked in the same places they had creaked for 50 years. He knew every sound this house made. He had built it. He had loved it. He had lost it. Frances sat on the edge of their bed, a single cardboard box at her feet. She was 77 years old, and her hands the hands that had made hats for the governor's wife, for the wives of senators, for women who flew in from Boston just to have something custom were folded in her lap. She had not cried. Frances had never been a crier. But her eyes were distant, looking at something Walter could not see. I found them, she said quietly. In the attic. The box with the hats I made for the church bazaar in 1976. I'd forgotten about them. Walter sat beside her. The bed sagged in the middle, the same sag they had slept in for 40 years. We'll figure something out. No, we won't. Frances picked up the box. It was dusty, held together with yellowing tape. He has the deed. He has the lawyers. We have this. She opened the box. Inside, beneath layers of tissue paper, lay a dozen hats wide-brimmed, narrow-brimmed, feathers, ribbons, silk flowers, the work of a woman who had loved her craft and been very good at it. Walter reached in and lifted one, a cloche hat in pale blue, the color of the sky in October. Beneath it, in the brim, he felt something stiff, something that was not felt or ribbon. Frances, he said, what's in this hat? She looked at it, and for the first time in 3 weeks, something moved behind her eyes, a memory, a light. In 1976, she said slowly, when we had the title dispute with the neighbor over the property line, I made a copy of the deed. I was so angry about the whole thing, and I thought it would be funny to keep a copy where no one would find it. So I sewed it into the brim of this hat. Walter stared at her. You sewed the deed into a hat. I was young. I thought it was clever. And then the dispute was resolved, and I forgot about it. I put the hat in the box with the others, and I forgot. Walter lifted the hat to the light. Through the blue felt, he could see the outline of something rectangular, something that had been there for 47 years. The hat had been in the attic for 47 years, and Walter did not know if the deed inside it was still valid, or if it was the original, or if it was a copy, or if it mattered at all. He pulled the stitching loose with his fingernails, the same fingernails that had once held a gavel, that had once sorted through boxes of estate jewelry, that had once held Frances's hand on their wedding day in 1969, and drew out a folded piece of paper, yellowed, brittle, the ink faded to brown. The paper was not the deed. Walter unfolded it and found a letter written in Frances's hand, dated June 1976. Dear whoever finds this, if you are reading this, I am probably dead, which is a morbid thought, but I have always been practical. This hat is a good hat. I made it for the church bazaar, and I hope whoever buys it wears it well. But I also sewed something else into this brim. A copy of the deed to our property on Maple Lane. Why? Because I am a suspicious woman, and because my husband is too trusting. He believes the best in people. I know better. The original deed is filed with the town, as it should be. But if anyone ever tries to take this property from Walter, if anyone ever tries to steal what we built, there is a copy here, and it is witnessed by 3 people, my mother, my sister Eleanor, and the Reverend Thomas Hartley, who was the minister at the First Congregational Church until he died in 1989. I hope you never need this. But if you do, I hope it helps. Francis Bishop, 1976. Walter read the letter 3 times. Then he looked at Frances, who was crying now, silent tears running down her face, and he understood that she had known something he had not known. She had known that trust was a gift, not a right. She had known that people could be cruel. She had known that the world took from you if you let it. Where is the deed? He asked. Under the letter, she said. I folded it in half. It's still there. Walter reached into the brim of the hat and found another piece of paper. This one was thicker, heavier, the kind of paper deeds were printed on in the 1970s. He pulled it out and unfolded it. It was the deed. A certified copy signed by the town clerk in 1976, witnessed by 3 people, bearing the official seal of the town of Ashford, Vermont. It was valid. Walter did not know if a deed that had been hidden in a hat for 47 years would hold up in court. He looked at Frances, and she looked back at him, and they made a decision together, the way they had made every decision for 54 years. We need a lawyer, Walter said. Someone who knows property law, someone who isn't afraid of Michael, Eleanor's son, Frances said. David, he's a lawyer in Montpelier. He handled my mother's estate. David, yes, I remember him. He was a good kid. He's 62 now. But he's still a good kid. Walter folded the deed carefully, the way you fold something you have waited 47 years to find. He placed it inside his shirt, against his chest, where he could feel it with every heartbeat. Then he picked up the gavel, his gavel, the one with the crack he had repaired himself, and he walked down the stairs, past Michael, who was still measuring, still cataloging, still counting Walter's life in square feet. I'm going for a drive, Walter said. Michael looked up. Don't be long. The movers come tomorrow. Walter did not answer. He walked out the door into the November cold and got into his truck, a 1998 Ford F-150 with 200,000 miles on it, and drove to Montpelier. The deed was warm against his chest. The hat was in Frances's hands. And for the first time in 3 weeks, Walter Bishop had a reason to hope. The Tuesday in November had begun like any other Tuesday in November, cold, gray, the sky the color of old stone, the trees bare and skeletal against the horizon. Walter had woken at 6, the way he had woken every morning for 60 years, and had made coffee the way he had made coffee every morning for 60 years in a percolator on the stove, the same percolator his mother had used, the one with the chipped enamel and the smell of chicory that filled the kitchen like a memory. Frances had come down at 6:30, her hair still in curlers, her bathrobe wrapped tight around her thin shoulders. She had sat at the kitchen table, the oak table Walter had bought at an estate sale in 1970, the one with the carving of a cat on the corner that some long-dead child had made with a pocket knife, and had watched the steam rise from her mug. He's coming today, she said. I know. What are we going to do? Talk to him. Listen to what he has to say. Make a decision. We already made a decision. We agreed to sign. I know. Then why do I feel like we're making a mistake? Walter had not answered. He had stood at the stove, watching the percolator bubble, and had thought about the word trust, what it meant, what it cost, what it took away from you when it was broken. Michael had arrived at 9. He had driven up in a black SUV with Connecticut plates, the kind of car that cost more than Walter's truck had cost new. He had parked in the driveway, had walked up the path Walter had laid with flagstone in 1978, and had knocked on the door like a stranger. Uncle Walter, Aunt Frances. "Thank you for seeing me." "Of course, Michael. Your family?" Michael had smiled. It was a good smile, warm, practiced, the kind of smile that made you want to trust him. He had sat on the sofa, had accepted a cup of coffee, and had begun to talk. It was a good pitch. Walter had to give him that. Michael had learned from the best had learned from Walter himself, who had spent 40 years selling things to people who did not want to buy them. Michael knew how to find the thing a person wanted to hear and give it to them in a velvet glove. "The estate tax is going to eat this property alive when you die," Michael had said. "You worked your whole life for this. Don't let the government take it. So what do you propose?" "A living trust. You sign the property over to me, I manage it. You live here until you die. It stays in the family, and if we need to sell..." "You won't need to sell. I'll take care of everything." Walter had looked at Frances. Frances had looked at Walter. 54 years of marriage had taught them to speak without words. "Do you trust him?" "I don't know." "Do you?" "I don't know either." But Michael was family. He was Thomas's son. Thomas, who had died too young, who had left a boy of 22 with no parents, no siblings, no one. Walter had stepped in. Walter had paid for his education. Walter had given him a job. Walter had treated him like a son. And now Michael was asking for a return on that investment. "We need to think about it," Frances had said. "Of course," Michael had said, and his smile had not flickered. "Take all the time you need." But the time had already been taken. Walter had signed the papers 3 days later, on a Tuesday in November, because Michael had called every day, had come by every evening, had sat in their living room and talked about family, about legacy, about trust. And Walter, who had spent his life believing in the best of people, had signed. The truck rattled over the back roads of Vermont, past farms that had been farmed since the 1700s, past barns that were collapsing under the weight of snow and time, past fields that had been harvested and left to rest for the winter. Walter drove with both hands on the wheel, the way he had driven since he was 16, and he thought about the hat. Frances had sewn a deed into a hat. It was the most Frances thing he had ever heard. She had always been practical, always been suspicious, always been the one who planned for the worst while hoping for the best. He had been the optimist. She had been the realist. Together, they had made a life, but the hat had been in the attic for 47 years. The deed inside it was old, yellowed, faded. Would a court accept it? Would a lawyer even look at it? Walter did not know, but he knew one thing. He was not going to let Michael take everything without a fight. He pulled into Montpelier at 11, parked on Main Street, and walked to the office of David Hartley, attorney at law. The building was old brick, 4 stories, with a brass plaque by the door that read, "Hartley and Associates, Estates and Property Law." Walter pushed open the door and walked inside. The receptionist looked up. She was young, maybe 25, with red hair and glasses and the kind of efficient smile that said she had seen everything. "Can I help you?" "I need to see David Hartley. It's urgent." "Do you have an appointment?" "No. David is in court this morning." "He won't be back until 1. "I'll wait." Walter sat in the waiting room on a leather chair that was too soft, surrounded by magazines he did not want to read. The deed was still against his chest, warm from his body heat. He could feel it with every breath. He thought about the hat. He thought about Frances, sitting in their bedroom, waiting for him to come back with news. He thought about Michael measuring their home, counting their life in square feet, and he waited. David Hartley walked through the door at 12:50. He was 62 years old, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had seen too many divorces, and too many wills and too many families torn apart by money. He recognized Walter immediately. "Walter, I heard what happened." "I'm sorry. You heard?" "Michael has been talking. He's been telling people you signed the property over willingly, that you were getting older, that you couldn't manage the house anymore, that he was doing you a favor. He's lying." David nodded. He sat in the chair across from Walter, folded his hands and waited. "I found something," Walter said. "In the attic." Frances sewed a copy of the deed into a hat in 1976. "It's signed. It's witnessed. It's valid." David's eyebrows went up. "She sewed a deed into a hat. 47 years ago. She forgot about it. We only found it this morning. Do you have it with you?" Walter reached into his shirt and pulled out the deed. He handed it to David, who unfolded it carefully, read it again, and then looked up with an expression Walter could not read. This is a certified copy. It's witnessed by 3 people. It's dated 1976. It's the same property that Michael is claiming. Is it valid? It's valid. But there's a problem. What problem? Michael has the original deed. He recorded with the town. He's the legal owner of record. This copy, it's valid, but it's not recorded. It's not in the chain of title. Can we use it? David leaned back in his chair. He looked at the deed, then at Walter, then at the deed again. We can use it, but we need to move fast. Michael is going to sell this property. He's already talking to buyers. If he sells it before we can get a court order, you'll have to sue the new owners, and that's a mess. So what do? We file a quiet title action. We ask the court to declare that you and Francis are the rightful owners of the property and that Michael's claim is invalid. We need to show that the deed was fraudulently obtained. Can we prove that? David smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent 40 years fighting for people who had been wronged. Michael came to you. He told you the property was at risk from estate taxes. He said you needed to sign it over to him to protect it. He promised you could live there until you died. That's fraud. That's undue influence. And we have a witness. Who? You and Francis. And anyone else who heard him say those things. Walter thought about it. He thought about Michael's warm smile, his velvet words, his promises of family and legacy and trust. He's my brother's son, Walter said. He's stealing your home. I know. I can file the papers today, but I need to know, are you ready for this? Michael is going to fight. He's going to say you signed willingly. He's going to say you were competent. He's going to bring his own lawyers, his own witnesses, his own evidence. I don't care. Good, because this is going to get ugly. David filed the quiet title action that afternoon. The papers were served on Michael at the house on Maple Lane, where he was still measuring, still cataloging, still planning the sale of Walter's life. Walter drove home. Frances was in the kitchen, the hat on the table in front of her, her hands folded around a mug of tea. She looked up when he walked in. It's done, he said. David filed the papers. We're going to court. What happens now? We wait. We fight. We hope the judge believes us. And if he doesn't? Walter sat across from her. He took her hands in her thin hands, her old hands, the hands that had made hats for 40 years, that had sewn a deed into a brim, that held him through every crisis of their long life together. Then we lose. But at least we'll have fought. Frances looked at the hat. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands, traced the line where she had sewn the deed into the brim 47 years ago. I never thought I'd need it, she said. I made it as a joke. I thought I was being clever. You were being clever. You were being the smartest person I've ever known. I was being scared. I was scared that someone would take this from us. I was scared that you were too trusting. You were right. Don't say that. It's true. You were right. Trusted Michael. I trusted him because he was family, because I loved him, because I wanted to believe he was good. And he took everything. Not everything. He didn't take the hat. Walter laughed. It was a broken laugh, a laugh that came from somewhere deep and painful, but it was a laugh nonetheless. No, he didn't take the hat. The night before the hearing, Walter could not sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Frances breathe beside him. The house was quiet. The wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. He thought about the gavel. He had bought it in 1968 at an auction in St. Johnsbury from an old auctioneer who was retiring. The gavel had been used for 40 years, through thousands of auctions, through the sale of farms and houses and estates, through the dissolution of lives. The old auctioneer had held it with reverence, like a priest holding a chalice. This gavel has sold more than I'll ever own, the old man had said. It sold happiness and sadness and everything in between. It sold hope. It sold despair. It sold the contents of 100 lives. You take care of it. Walter had taken care of it. He had used it for 33 years, until the day he closed his auction house in 2001, the day he hung up his gavel for good. He had repaired the crack himself with epoxy and fine copper wire, because he could not bear to replace it. And now, sitting in the dark, holding the gavel in his hands, he understood something he had not understood before. The gavel was not just a tool, was a symbol. It was the symbol of his life, of his work, of his belief that everything had a value, that everything could be sold, that everything would find its price. But some things could not be sold. Some things had no price. Home, lust, dignity. Michael had tried to sell those things. Michael had tried to put a price on Walter's life, and Walter had let him. But not anymore. He put the gavel on the nightstand, turned over, and closed his eyes. Tomorrow he would fight. Tomorrow he would stand in a courtroom and tell a judge what Michael had done. Tomorrow he would hold the hat in his hands and show the world what Frances had sewn into its brim. And if he lost, then he would lose with dignity. He would lose with his head held high. He would lose knowing that he had fought for what was his. The hearing was held in the Vermont Superior Court in Montpelier, in a courtroom that smelled of old wood and dust and the lingering residue of 1,000 arguments. Walter sat at the plaintiff's table, next to David Hartley. Frances sat beside him, the hat on her lap, her hands folded on top of it. Michael sat at the defendant's table across the aisle. He wore a navy blue suit, a white shirt, a red tie. He looked like a man who had never lost anything in his life. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The judge sat, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the two tables with the weary expression of someone who had seen too many families tear themselves apart. Mr. Hartley, you've filed a quiet title action on behalf of Walter and Frances Bishop. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Reynolds. You represent Michael Bishop? Yes, Your Honor. The judge looked at the papers in front of her. She read for a long moment, then looked up. This is an unusual case. Mr. Bishop assigned a deed transferring his property to his nephew. He now claims the deed was obtained through fraud and undue influence. The nephew claims the deed was signed voluntarily. That's correct, Your Honor, David said. Mr. Reynolds, what's your position? Michael's lawyer stood. He was young, sharp, the kind of lawyer who charged by the hour and made you feel every minute of it. The deed was signed willingly, Your Honor. My client's uncle is elderly, but he's competent. He understood what he was signing. He signed of his own free will. There was no fraud, no undue influence. Just a family transaction that one party now regrets. The judge turned to Walter. Mr. Bishop, can you tell me, in your own words, what happened? Walter stood. He was 80 years old. His hands shook. His voice was thin, but he stood. Your Honor, my nephew came to me and told me that if I didn't sign the property over to him, the government would take it when I died. He said he would take care of it. He said I could live there until I died. He said he was doing it for the family. And you believed him? He's my brother's son. I raised him. I paid for his education. I loved him. But you signed the deed. Yes, Your Honor. I signed it. Because I trusted him. And now you want it back. Yes, Your Honor. The judge looked at Michael. Mr. Bishop, do you have anything to say? Michael stood. He adjusted his tie. He looked at Walter with an expression that was almost pitying. Your Honor, I love my uncle. I would never do anything to hurt him. But the fact is, he's getting older. He can't take care of that property anymore. He signed the deed voluntarily. I have witnesses who saw him sign it. I have a video recording of the signing. A video recording? Yes, Your Honor. I recorded it on my phone, to protect myself. The judge's eyebrows went up. You recorded your uncle signing over his property without telling him? It's legal in Vermont, Your Honor. One-party consent. But you didn't tell him you were recording. No, Your Honor. The judge looked at the papers in front of her. She was silent for a long moment. Then she looked at Walter. Mr. Bishop, do you have any evidence that the deed was obtained through fraud? David stood. Your Honor, we have a witness. The plaintiff's wife, Frances Bishop, will testify that the defendant told them the transfer was temporary, that they would be allowed to live in the house until they died. That's hearsay, Your Honor, Michael's lawyer said. The plaintiff's wife is not a disinterested party. Your Honor, David said, we also have a document, a copy of the original deed, dated 1976, witnessed by 3 people, bearing the official seal of the town of Ashford. It was sewn into a hat by the plaintiff's wife. The judge stared at him. I'm sorry, it was sewn into a what? A hat, Your Honor. A hat that Frances Bishop made in 1976. She sewed a certified copy of the deed into the brim, as a joke, and then she forgot about it. We found it 3 days ago. The judge looked at Frances. Mrs. Bishop, is that true? Frances stood. She was 77 years old. Her hands were steady. Her voice was clear. Yes, Your Honor, it's true. I sewed the deed into the brim of a hat in 1976. I was angry about a property line dispute with our neighbor, and I thought it would be funny to keep a copy where no one would find it. And then I forgot about it. I put the hat in a box in the attic, and I forgot about it for 47 years. And you still have this hat? Yes, Your Honor, it's right here. Frances lifted the hat. It was pale blue, the color of the sky in October, with a wide brim and a simple band. The stitching where she had sewn the deed into the brim was visible, a line of tiny, careful stitches that had held for 47 years. The judge looked at the hat for a long moment. Then she looked at Michael. Mr. Bishop, did you know about this? No, Your Honor. I didn't. Did you know that your aunt had sewn a copy of the deed into a hat? Of course not. That's absurd. Is it? Because it seems to me that your aunt was more suspicious of you than you realized. She sewed a copy of the deed into a hat 47 years ago, and she kept it. She never threw it away. She never forgot where it was. She kept it because she knew that someday someone might try to take what was hers. Michael's face went pale. Your Honor, that hat is not evidence. It's a piece of clothing. It's a hat. It's a hat with a deed sewn into it, the judge said. And that deed is a certified copy witnessed by 3 people, bearing the official seal of the town of Ashford. It's dated 1976. It's the same property that you claim to own. Your Honor, I'm not making a ruling today. I'm going to take this under advisement. But Mr. Bishop, I want you to think about something. You recorded your uncle signing over his property. You didn't tell him you were recording. You told him the transfer was temporary. You told him he could live in the house until he died. And now you're trying to sell it out from under him. That's not true, Your Honor, isn't it? Because I have a witness who says it is. I have a hat with a deed sewn into it, and I have a feeling that this case is going to get a lot more interesting before it's over. The judge stood. Everyone stood. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Mr. Bishop, you are not to sell or transfer the property in question until this matter is resolved. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor. Good. We're adjourned. Walter and Frances walked out of the courthouse together. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The hat was in Frances' hands, the deed still sewn into its brim. David caught up with them. That went well. Better than I expected. What happens now? We wait. The judge is going to look at the deed, look at the witnesses, look at the evidence. She's going to decide whether to void the transfer. And if she does, then the property goes back to you. Michael loses everything. Will he go to jail? David shook his head. Probably not. But he'll lose the property. He'll lose the money he spent on lawyers. He'll lose the respect of everyone who knows what he did. Walter looked at Frances. She was holding the hat against her chest, the way you hold something precious, something you have waited a long time to find. What about the hat? He asked. The hat is evidence, David said, but after the case is over, you can keep it. It's yours. It's always been ours. They walked to the truck. Walter helped Frances into the passenger seat. He walked around to the driver's side, got in, and started the engine. The truck rumbled to life, the heater blowing cold air, the windows fogging up in the November chill. Where do we go? Frances asked. Home. Are we allowed to go home? It's still our home, until the judge says otherwise. They drove back to Maple Lane. The house was dark, the windows empty, the driveway bare. Michael's SUV was gone. The house was silent. Walter parked in the driveway. He sat for a moment, looking at the house he had built with his hands in 1972, the black walnut siding, milled from the tree that had come down in the storm. The porch he had built in 1985, the year Frances had broken her hip and needed a place to sit in the sun. The garden she had planted in 1990, the one with the roses that bloomed every June, the one that was now dead and brown and waiting for spring. It's still standing, Frances said. It's still ours. They walked inside. The house was cold. Michael had turned off the heat. Walter went to the basement, found the pilot light lit the furnace. The house began to warm. Frances put the hat on the kitchen table. She made tea. They sat in the kitchen, in the dark, the only light coming from the stove, and they drank their tea in silence. I was wrong, Walter said. About what? About trusting Michael. About trusting anyone. I've always believed the best in people. And it's cost me everything. It hasn't cost you everything. You still have me. You still have the house. You still have the hat. The hat. Yes, the hat. The thing I sued a deed into 47 years ago as a joke, because I was suspicious and angry and I wanted to be prepared. You were prepared. I was lucky. No, you were smart. You were the smartest person I've ever known. And I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. Frances reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, thin, the fingers of a woman who had spent her life making beautiful things. You listened to me. You just trusted the wrong person. I trusted Michael. You loved Michael. There's a difference. Is there? Love is trust. Trust is love. You can't have one without the other. And Michael broke both. But that doesn't mean you were wrong to love him. It means he was wrong to break it. Walter looked at her. In the dim light of the stove, she looked young again, the way she had looked in 1969, the year they got married, the year they bought the house, the year they started their life together. I love you, he said. I know. I love you more than I've ever loved anything. I know. And I'm sorry I didn't protect you from this. You did protect me. You found the hat. You took it to David. You stood up in court and told the truth. That's protection. It's not enough. It's enough. It's always been enough. They sat in the kitchen, holding hands, the hat on the table between them, and they waited for the morning. The next morning, Walter woke before dawn. He lay in bed, listening to Frances breathe, listening to the house settle around him. The heat had come back. The pipes were warm. The house was alive again. He got up, went to the kitchen, made coffee. The percolator bubbled on the stove, filling the house with the smell of chicory. He sat at the table, the gavel in his hands, and he thought about the hat. The hat was on the table. He had not moved it. He had not touched it. It sat there, pale blue, the stitching visible, the deed still inside. He picked it up. The felt was soft, worn smooth by 47 years in a box. The brim was stiff, the stitching tight. He turned it over in his hands, the way you turn over something you have found after a long time, something you had forgotten, something that had been waiting for you. He thought about Frances, sewing the deed into the brim in 1976. She would have been 31 years old, her hands steady, her eyes sharp. She would have been angry about the property line dispute, angry about the neighbor, angry about the whole thing. And she would have laughed to herself, thinking about how clever she was, sewing a deed into a hat. She had not known that 47 years later, that hat would save their home. She had not known that the nephew they loved would try to steal everything. She had not known that a joke would become the only thing that stood between them and losing everything. But she had sewn it anyway. She had sewn it because she was practical, because she was suspicious, because she was the smartest person Walter had ever known. And now, sitting in the kitchen, holding the hat in his hands, Walter understood something he had not understood before. The hat was not just a hat, it was a symbol. It was a symbol of Frances's love, of her practicality, of her determination to protect what was theirs. It was the symbol of everything she had done for him, everything she had given him, everything she had been. He put the hat back on the table. He drank his coffee. He waited for the sun to rise. The sun rose over the hills of Vermont, pale and cold, the light filtering through the bare trees. Walter stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the garden, at the dead roses, at the frost on the grass. Frances came down at 7. She was dressed in her blue bathrobe, her hair still damp from the shower. She looked at Walter, at the hat on the table, at the coffee in his hands. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She sat down across from him. The percolator hissed on the stove. She reached out and touched the hat, her fingers tracing the stitching, the brim, the felt. "I keep thinking about it," she said. "About that night, the moon through the window, the flashlight, the sewing needle. 47 years ago. 47 years. She laughed, a soft, dry sound. "I was so angry. I remember being so angry. The neighbor, that man, what was his name? Harrison. Harrison. He said the property line was 2 feet into our yard, said he had a survey, said he was going to take us to court." She shook her head. "I was so angry I couldn't sleep. And then I thought of the hat." "Why the hat?" I don't know. I just thought of it. I thought, if I sew the deed into something, if I hide it somewhere they won't look, then no one can take it. No one can lose it. No one can steal it." She looked at him. "I didn't think about the nephew. I didn't think about any of this. I just thought about the neighbor. The neighbor died in 1982, and the hat went into the box, and I forgot about it." She picked it up, held it in her hands. "I forgot about it for 40 years. You remembered." "I remembered when I saw the box. When I saw the dust. When I saw the moonlight." She put the hat down. "I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't remembered." "You would have remembered." "How do you know?" "Because you always remember. You remember everything. You remember the year we got married, the year we bought the house, the year we started our life together. You remember the roses, the garden, the fence. You remember the hat." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You remember everything." She squeezed his hand. "I remember you." They sat in the kitchen, the hat between them, and they waited for the day to begin. The phone rang at 9 o'clock. Walter picked it up. "Hello, Walter." It was David's voice, calm, measured, the voice of a man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "I have news. Good news or bad news?" "Good news. The court has ruled. The injunction is lifted. The house is yours." Walter felt something loosen in his chest, something he had been holding tight for months, maybe years. He leaned against the counter, the phone pressed to his ear. "They ruled in our favor?" "They ruled in your favor. The deed is valid. The transfer to the nephew was fraudulent. The judge ordered the property returned to you and Frances, with all rights and privileges restored. All rights and privileges. All of them. The house, the land, the garden, everything. They also ordered the nephew to pay court costs and legal fees. He has 30 days. 30 days. 30 days to pay. If he doesn't, the court will place a lien on his assets." Walter closed his eyes. He thought about the nephew, about the boy he had raised, about the man he had become. He thought about the court case, the evidence, the testimony. He thought about the hat. "Is there anything else?" he asked. "There is one thing." David paused. "The nephew has been charged with fraud and attempted theft. The district attorney is pursuing the case. There will be a criminal trial." "A criminal trial?" "Yes. He could face up to 10 years in prison." Walter said nothing. He thought about the nephew, about the boy who had played in the garden, who had climbed the oak tree, who had eaten Frances's cookies. He thought about the man who had tried to take everything. "What do you want to do?" David asked. I want to talk to Francis. Take your time. The decision isn't yours to make alone. I know. He hung up the phone. He stood in the kitchen, the receiver in his hand, the hat on the table, Francis watching him from her chair. What is it? She asked. The court ruled in our favor. The house is ours. She closed her eyes. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was steady. And the nephew? He's been charged with fraud and attempted theft. There will be a criminal trial. He could go to prison. She opened her eyes. She looked at the hat, at the deed inside, at the stitching she had made 47 years ago. What do you want to do? Walter asked. I want to see him. Why? Because I want to look him in the eye. I want to see what he's become. I want to know if he's still the boy we raised, or if he's something else entirely. He's not the boy we raised. Then I want to see what he is. They drove to the county courthouse in the afternoon. The sky was gray, the light flat, the trees bare. Frances sat in the passenger seat, the hat in her lap, her hands folded over it. You don't have to do this, Walter said. Yes, I do. David said we don't have to press charges. He said we could ask the district attorney to drop the case. I know. Do you want to ask him to drop the case? No. Walter looked at her. Her face was calm, her eyes clear. She was not angry. She was not sad. She was something else, something he could not name. What do you want? He asked. I want to see him. I want to look at him. I want to understand. Understand what? How he could do this. How he could try to take the house. How he could try to take everything we built. She shook her head. I raised him. I changed his diapers. I taught him to read. I taught him to tie his shoes. I taught him to tell the truth. And he forgot. He didn't forget. He chose. He made a choice. She looked out the window, and I want to know why. They parked in the courthouse lot. They walked up the steps, through the doors into the marble hallway. David met them at the entrance, his briefcase in his hand, his face serious. He's in the holding cell, David said. He's agreed to see you. Thank you, Frances said. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes. David led them down a hallway, through a door, into a small room with a table and chairs. The walls were gray, the floor was gray, the light was fluorescent and flat. Wait here, David said. I'll bring him in. He left. Frances sat down at the table. Walter sat beside her. The hat was in her lap, her hands still folded over it. The door opened, the nephew walked in. He was not the boy they remembered. He was a man, 42 years old, his hair thinning, his face lined, his eyes hollow. He wore an orange jumpsuit, his wrists cuffed, his ankles shackled. He shuffled to the table and sat down across from them. Frances, he said. Walter. Hello, Thomas, Frances said. Her voice was calm, her face was calm, her hands were still. She looked at him the way you look at a photograph of someone you used to know, someone who has changed, someone you no longer recognize. I'm sorry, he said. Are you? Yes. Why? He looked down at the table. His hands were shaking. Because I was greedy. Because I was desperate. Because I thought I could get away with it. You thought you could steal our house. I thought. He stopped. He took a breath. I thought you were going to die anyway. I thought you wouldn't need it. I thought. You thought we were going to die. Yes. Frances nodded. She did not flinch. She did not cry. She looked at him, her eyes steady, her voice quiet. We raised you, she said. We changed your diapers. We taught you to read. We taught you to tie your shoes. We taught you to tell the truth. I know. You forgot. I know. You made a choice. I know. She leaned forward. Her hands were still on the hat, her fingers tracing the stitching, the brim, the felt. I want you to understand something, she said. This house is not just a house. It is a home. It is the place where Walter and I built our life. It is the place where we planted a garden, where we grew roses, where we watched the stars. It is the place where we loved each other, where we loved you, where we loved everyone who walked through the door. I know. You tried to take that away. She sat back. She looked at him, her eyes clear, her face calm. You will go to prison, she said. You will lose everything, your job, your house, your family, your friends. You will lose it all, I know. And I will not ask the district attorney to drop the case. I know. She stood up. She looked at him one more time, her eyes searching his face, looking for something, looking for the boy she had raised, looking for the man he had become. Goodbye, Thomas, she said. She turned and walked out of the room. Walter followed her. The door closed behind them. They walked down the hallway, through the marble lobby, out into the gray afternoon. The air was cold, the sky was flat, the trees were bare. Frances stopped at the car. She looked at the courthouse, at the windows, at the door. I thought I would feel something, she said. I thought I would feel anger or sadness or relief, but I don't feel anything. That's okay. Is it? Yes. Walter put his arm around her. It's okay to not feel anything. It's okay to be empty. It's okay to be still. She leaned into him. The hat was in her hands, the deed still inside, the stitching still tight. "Let's go home," she said. They drove home in silence. The road wound through the hills, past the bare trees, past the frozen fields, past the houses with smoke rising from their chimneys. Frances held the hat in her lap, her fingers tracing the stitching, the brim, the felt. When they reached the house, the gate was open. The garden was dead, the roses were bare. But the house was warm, the pipes were working, the lights were on. Walter parked the car. They walked up the path, through the door, into the kitchen. The percolator was still on the stove. The coffee was cold. The morning newspaper was on the table unread. Frances sat down at the table. She put the hat in front of her. She looked at it, her eyes soft, her face tired. "I want to put it back," she said. "Put it box. In the attic, where I found it." "Why?" "Because it belongs there. Because it's been there for 47 years. Because it's part of the house, part of the history, part of the story." Walter nodded. He understood. He understood that the hat was not just a hat, that it was a symbol, that it was a relic, that it was something sacred. He helped her up the stairs, through the attic door, into the dusty room. The box was still there, the lid open, the tissue paper inside. She put the hat in the box. She closed the lid. She put the box back in the corner, under the eaves, where the moonlight had found it. "There," she said. "It's home." They went back downstairs. They made fresh coffee. They sat in the kitchen, holding hands, the house warm around them, the silence comfortable. The next morning, Walter found an envelope in the mailbox. It was white plain, no return address. He opened it. Inside was a piece of paper folded in half, with handwriting he recognized. "Frances, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand. I don't expect anything, but I want you to know that I remember the garden. I remember the roses. I remember the cookies. I remember the oak tree. I remember the summer we painted the fence, the winter we shoveled the driveway, the fall we raked the leaves. I remember you. I remember Walter. I remember the house. I'm sorry." Thomas Walter read the note twice. He folded it. He put it in his pocket. He walked back into the house. Frances was in the kitchen making breakfast, the percolator bubbling on the stove. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just the mail." He sat down at the table. She put a plate of eggs in front of him. She sat down across from him. They ate breakfast in silence. The sun rose over the hills, pale and cold, the light filtering through the trees. After breakfast, Frances went to the garden. She put on her coat, her gloves, her boots. She walked through the dead roses, the frozen soil, the bare trees. Walter watched her from the kitchen window. She stopped at the oak tree, the one the nephew had climbed as a boy. She touched the bark, the branches, the trunk. She stood there for a long time. Then she turned and walked back to the house. Spring came slowly to Vermont that year. The snow melted. The ground thawed. The first green shoots appeared in the garden. Frances planted roses, new roses, red and white and yellow. She watered them, weeded them, talked to them. She spent hours in the garden, her hands in the soil, her face to the sun. Walter fixed the fence. He replaced the rotting boards, painted the new ones white, hammered in the nails. He worked slowly, carefully, the way you work when you are building something that will last. They did not talk about the nephew. They did not talk about the court case. They did not talk about the criminal trial. But David called to tell them that Thomas had pleaded guilty. He had been sentenced to 5 years in prison. He had lost his job, his house, his family. Frances listened to the news. She nodded. She said nothing. She went back to the garden. Summer came hot and bright. The roses bloomed. The garden was full of color, full of life, full of bees and butterflies and birds. Frances and Walter sat on the porch every evening, drinking iced tea, watching the sun set over the hills. They held hands. They talked about nothing. They talked about everything. One evening, Frances said, "I think I forgive him." Walter looked at her. "Do you?" "Yes. Not for him, for me." "Why?" "Because I don't want to carry it anymore. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be sad. I want to be free." "Are you free?" She thought about it. She looked at the roses, at the fence, at the house, at the sky. "Yes," she said. "I think I am." He squeezed her hand. "Good." They sat on the porch, the sun setting, the stars coming out, the world quiet around them. That night, Frances could not sleep. She got up, put on her bathrobe, walked through the dark house. The moon was full, the light silver, the shadows long. She walked up the stairs, through the attic door, into the dusty room. The box was there, under the eaves, where she had left it. She opened the lid. The hat was inside, pale blue, the stitching visible, the deed still inside. She picked it up. She held it in her hands. She turned it over, the way you turn over something you have found after a long time, something you had forgotten, something that had been waiting for you. She thought about the night she had sewn the deed into the brim. She had been 31 years old, angry about the neighbor, angry about the property line, angry about the whole thing. She had laughed to herself, thinking about how clever she was. She had not known that 47 years later that hat would save their home. She had not known that the nephew they loved would try to steal everything. She had not known that a joke would become the only thing that stood between them and losing everything. But she had sewn it anyway. She put the hat back in the box. She closed the lid. She put the box back in the corner, under the eaves, where the moonlight could find it. She walked back downstairs. Walter was standing in the kitchen, a glass of water in his hand. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "No." "What were you doing?" "Visiting an old friend." He did not ask. He did not need to. He put his arm around her. They walked back to bed together. The next morning, Frances woke before dawn. She lay in bed, listening to Walter breathe, listening to the house settle around her. The heat was working. The pipes were warm. The house was alive. She got up, went to the kitchen, made coffee. The percolator bubbled on the stove, filling the house with the smell of chicory. She sat at the table, the hat in her hands. She did not know why she had brought it down. She did not know why she was holding it. She only knew that it belonged here, in her hands, on the table, in the kitchen. She thought about the nephew. She thought about the note. She thought about the garden, the roses, the fence. She thought about forgiveness. She looked at the hat. The felt was soft, worn smooth by 47 years in a box. The stitching was tight, the deed still inside. She put the hat on her head. It fit perfectly. She laughed, a soft, dry sound, the first laugh she had laughed in months. Walter came into the kitchen. He looked at her, at the hat on her head, at the smile on her face. "You look beautiful," he said. "I look ridiculous. You look beautiful." She took off the hat. She held it in her hands. She looked at it, her eyes soft, her face calm. "What should we do with it?" she asked. "Whatever you want." She thought about it. She looked at the hat, at the stitching, at the brim. "Let's keep it," she said. "Let's put it on the mantel. Let's look at it every day. Let's remember." "Remember what?" "Remember that we survived. Remember that we loved. Remember that we are still here." He nodded. He understood. He took the hat from her hands. He walked into the living room. He put it on the mantel, next to the photographs, next to the clock, next to the dried roses. He stepped back. He looked at it. It belonged there. He walked back into the kitchen. Frances was standing by the stove, the percolator bubbling, the coffee ready. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For everything." He put his arms around her. She leaned into him. They stood in the kitchen, the smell of chicory in the air, the sun rising over the hills, and they were home.